We're now going to build our first GUI-based application, and here you can see a running version of the app in which we have a title bar for the window that says a simple app. We have some text being displayed in what's known as a label control, and we have an image being displayed in what's known as a picture box control. Now, in order to start building that app, the first thing we're going to do is to close the project we were working on or working with earlier in this lesson. And you can do that by going to the File menu and selecting Close Solution. Then we're going to create an entirely new Windows Forms application project. So if you go to the File menu and select New and then Project, you'll be presented with the New Project dialog, which we showed you previously. You want to make sure that you're in the Visual C# node under Windows and then Classic Desktop, where you can select Windows Forms Application. And for this one, we're going to call the app a simple app. And you can click OK to create the project. So at this point, we're ready to start building. Next, we're going to set the text that's displayed in the title bar of our form window. You can see that by default it's set to Form 1, which you can access via the text property here in the Properties window. If by any chance Form 1 is not displayed here in the Properties window, you can select it from this drop-down list, or you can simply click the form here in the designer. So for this one, we want to just change the text to a simple app. And when you press enter, you can see here in the title bar of the form that the text has been changed. Another thing that we want to do for this particular app is make the window slightly larger. We actually set the app's window size to 400 pixels wide by 360 pixels tall. And we can do that a couple of different ways. First of all, you'll notice that there are sizing handles that you can use to stretch the window horizontally, vertically, or diagonally. And in our case, we grabbed this handle and just started dragging down to the right. And you'll notice down here it's showing you the current width and height. Now, again, 400 by 360 pixels, so you can see I can kind of get it close, and if I drag slowly enough I might be able to get right onto the number. There it is. But I can also go right here to the size property, and the width is displayed before the height, so I could type 400, 360 to make the change, or I can expand the size property and individually set the width and the height as well. So just for demonstration purposes here, if I wanted the width to be 600, I could type that and press enter, and you see that the form immediately resizes. And similarly, I could type 400 and press enter to go back to the size that we want for this particular app. Next, we'd like to change the background color of the form. Now, this is not a required step by any means, but we just want to show you interacting with a couple of different types of properties. So once again, with the form selected, we'd like to go ahead over here and change the background color, which you can access via the so-called back color property. Now, there are two different ways to look at the properties here in the Properties window. Currently, I have the alphabetical icon selected, which sorts the properties alphabetically in increasing order from top to bottom in the Properties window. We can also look at them in a categorized manner where you can see various different categories that are expandable within the Properties window. So for example, here's an entire layout category with everything that has to do with the layout or positioning of a window. I typically find it easier to work in alphabetical because then I know exactly where I need to look to locate a particular property. So here's the back color property, and when you select that property you get this little down arrow here, and if you click the down arrow you'll be presented with this pop-up window in which you have three tabs: Custom, Web, and System. Now we chose our color from the Custom tab, and in particular I chose this light blue color that's third from the right here on the first row of colors. So if I go ahead and click that, you can see that now the color has changed here inside the form. Next, we're going to add a label to the user interface, and that's where we're going to display the text, "Welcome to C# Programming," with an exclamation point. So over here in the toolbox, there are a couple of different ways we can add a label to the form. One is to double click the control that we want to use to add it to the form, and the other is to drag the label onto the form in a specific position. So I want to demonstrate both of those for a moment. So first I'll double click label, and you can see that the label is positioned by default all the way up in the upper left corner of the window, and of course I can grab it and move it from there. And in this case I'll hit my delete key to remove that from the form, just so I can demonstrate the other way. So again, the other way is to drag a label directly where you want it. So for example, notice as I drag that I'm getting some blue bars that pop up, and those enable me to see recommended distances from, in this case, the top and the left edge of the client area, if you will, within the form, the light blue area that we changed the background color of here. And as you position controls with respect to other controls, other snap lines will help you with the proper positioning. So if I drag the label onto the user interface and let go, you can see it positions the label where I released the mouse. Now in this case, we don't want the label's text to be label 1. We want it to be welcome to C# programming with an exclamation point. And just like with the form's text property, which sets the text in the form's title bar, a label's text property sets the text that's displayed in the label. Many of the controls that you'll work with have lots of common properties, but they may operate a little bit differently depending on what control it is that you're using. So let's go to the text property here for our label, and you can see label 1 is the default text, and we're going to change that to welcome to C# programming with an exclamation point. Notice the text has not changed yet because I didn't press enter, so as soon as I press enter, it goes ahead and updates that label. And one of the things that we're going to want to do is center this text within the form, and I'll be moving the label around a couple of times as we get to the point of completing this user interface. So one way to center this label in its current size on the screen is to select the label and go to the Format menu and select Center and Form horizontally, and now left to right that label is centered. Now there are a couple of other things that we're going to be changing about this label. So right now the label is set to auto size itself, which means it automatically resizes the width of the label for whatever text you place in it. And one of the things we're going to want to do is change the font size of this label and get it to show the label's text on 2 lines instead of 1. So for that purpose, I'm going to change another property of this label, which is the so-called auto size property. And if I scroll up to auto size in my alphabetical list here, you can see that it's currently set to true. When you have a true-false property like this, there are a couple of ways to change its value, one of which is to simply double-click on the value, at which point it toggles the value to false. If I double-click it again, it toggles it back to true, and so I'll double-click it a third time here. And you can also select from the 2 possible values by clicking the drop-down and then selecting true or false as well. So as you can see, with auto size set to false, now the label doesn't show all the text properly. So if I go ahead and resize the label, you can see now we have the text here on 2 lines at the moment, and it's not centered anymore. So if I want to, I could go back to my Format menu and center this in the form horizontally. Now the text itself is not centered, the label is centered. So we'll change some other properties of the label as we move forward here that will enable us to center the text within the label, and then when the label itself is centered horizontally, the text will also be centered horizontally. Next, we're going to change the size of the font and the actual font that's used for this label. Now, Microsoft recommends that the text in your user interfaces be based on the Segoe UI font. So I'm going to change the text here to use that font. And I'm going to scroll down to the font property here, and you'll notice if I stretch my properties window, it tells me all of the details of this font. Currently, It's set to the Microsoft Sans Serif font with 8.25 points as the size of the font. If I expand this node, you can see that there are several different sub options for the font that we can use, but really the only things that we care about are the size and the font in this particular example. And for that purpose, I'll modify the font by clicking the ellipsis button, which normally means that a dialog will be displayed that enables you to change the font. So as you can see, we can set the font style, the font size, and some other aspects of the font as well. So I can scroll through the list of fonts, or I can simply start typing Segoe, S-E-G, and you can see the Segoe UI font here. And the default size that they recommend for text in a graphical user interface is Segoe UI 9 point. In this case, we're going to set it to 24 point because we want a large font to be displayed for our label. Once you click OK, that will be applied, and now you can see that only a small portion of the text within the label is being displayed. So at this point, we can go ahead and resize our label using the various sizing handles, and you see Welcome to C# Programming now fitting on 2 lines on the user interface. And again, we're going to want to center that label, so what we'll do here is go ahead and with the label selected, go to the Format menu, center and form horizontally, and we make sure that it's left to right positioned where we want it. The next thing we want to do is change the label's text alignment. And the alignment of the text inside of the label is set with the so-called text align property. So still with the label selected here, we're going to scroll down until we find text align. And you can see it's currently set to top left, which means that the text is pushed towards the top left corner of the label no matter how big the label is. But if you select that property and click the down arrow, you can see that you can position the text at the top left, bottom left, top center, middle center, bottom center, top right, middle right, bottom right. So you have a lot of different options that you can select from here. We're going to use middle center in this case, and you'll notice actually if I switch back for a moment, watch the text in the label as I switch back to top left, and then watch as I select middle center. You see the text is moving around within the label. So now we have the label set up the way we want, and we're going to now add a picture box into the user interface. So now let's go ahead and get the picture box onto the user interface by dragging it from the toolbox into the design area. Now you might have seen quickly a blue line appear. There it is. That's a snap guide to help you align the left edge of the picture box with the left edge of the label above it. If I drag further to the left, I'll see a snap guide indicating the recommended positioning distance of the picture box from the left edge of the form. If I drag down, I can see a recommended distance guide from the bottom edge of the form as well. Now in this case, I want to position this right below the label, and you'll notice as I drag up, it snaps into place with a little snap line above it, indicating the recommended distance between the top of the picture box and the bottom of the label. So I'll let go of the picture box there. And now what we want to do is incorporate the image resource that we're going to use to display an image in this picture box. And to do that, I'm going to work with the image property down here in the properties window for our selected picture box control. Now if you click the value field for the property, you'll see the little ellipsis button pop up, and if I click that, I get the select resource dialog. Now through this dialog's import option, I can navigate to where the image is that I'd like to use as a resource in this project. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And for this, you're going to want to go to where the examples are on your system, navigate into the ch02 folder, and go ahead and select, in our case, the bug.png file. If you want, you can use any other image that you'd like. This is our Dytel bug logo, so I like to use it for demonstration purposes. So I'll double click bug.png, and you can see here it's previewing only a small portion of the image because the image is actually quite large, but you can drag down the bottom right corner here to see more of the image if you would like. So once you've selected the image, you'll notice it's naming it based on its file name. So the file name without the file name extension .png becomes the resource name. And when you click OK, that will automatically select that resource as the image's source. Now, you'll notice I can't really see the image right now, and that's because in the upper left corner of the image, which is transparent, it has a transparent background, there's just white space. So the image is so big that I'm not seeing any of it inside of this particular picture box at the moment. So one of the ways that you can deal with that is to stretch the image by using the size mode property of the picture box. And to do that, we're going to scroll down here to size mode, which is normal. That says don't change the pixel dimensions of the image. But if I click on that, you can see when I hit the down button, there are a number of different options here. When you select stretch image, it will either contract the image to fit inside the picture box, or it will expand the image to fit. So now we can see the whole image, but clearly it's not nearly as large as the final version of the app. So for that purpose, what we're going to do is stretch the image picture box here all the way until we get the recommended distance from the left edge, and we're going to do that here as well for the recommended distance from the right, and we'll even stretch it down to the bottom also until it snaps into place. So now we have a nice large image, and we've actually now completed the design of this simple app. So now we can go ahead and execute the program. In this case, I'll simply click the Start button here on the toolbar, and it will build the project and run the project, and now you see the project here running in its own window. And of course, I can minimize the window, which puts it down here on the task tray. I can click that to bring it back up. I can maximize the window, in which case the label and the image are staying in the upper left corner of the window, because I did not specify the settings that would enable me to keep this label centered within the window, the parent window, and to keep this image centered and possibly even scale it to a larger size within the window based on the window's dimensions. Those are things that we'll look at in more detail when we get into more elaborate GUI apps later on in these live lessons videos. If I click that middle button again, it'll resize back to its normal size, and you can terminate the app simply by clicking the close box.